Amen, family. I'm Kianna Simmons DeGraff. I'm a general dentist and oral medicine specialist, and I'm super excited to bring this devotional to you, my personal experience. And I've entitled it Everlasting Impressions. And our text for today is Romans 11:33. Oh, the depth of the riches, both of the wisdom and knowledge of God. How unsearchable are his judgments and his ways past finding out. So my story begins really about 6 or 7 years ago, almost 8 really, a year or two after I attended my first Amen conference. I really had my first true experience or dental encounter, as you could say, ministry minded. I kind of had a shift in my thinking of how I practiced and how I lived, and I always wanted to be in healthcare. I knew that as a young child. My best friend and I always grew up thinking that we'd be in the healthcare profession in some way. And my patient walked in this particular morning. I'm going to call him Mr. Smith. I'd always knew I wanted to see patients and treat them, and there were some that were more friendly than others, not so much all the time. And Mr. Smith was one of those not so much all the time nice patients. As a matter of fact, he came in, he was about a middle-aged gentleman at the time, I thought, but he was near retirement. And he was always rude and kind of obnoxious, and he never really wanted to talk. It was more of a grunt, so to speak. And he kind of made me feel really belittled. One, because I was female. Two, because I was young. At least that's what I thought. And I never could really quite have a conversation with him. And so to pray with a patient or to talk about anything about faith was so far away from him, so I thought. And I put him in this category or this box that, okay, this is one of the patients that I guess dentistry is just going to have to do. But God had another plan. He always has another plan. I'm so grateful for that. Fast forward after this initial encounter with him, about a couple of weeks later, he came in and I was about to walk into the operatory to see him, and I whispered a prayer under my breath, knowing I don't feel like seeing Mr. Smith today. I was like, Lord, please help me with this guy. And I walked in, I said, good morning, Mr. Smith. And I got back, well, hello, doctor. It's good to see you today. And that kind of took me back a bit because, like I said, Mr. Smith was a grunter. And I said, what brings you in to see me? And he said to me, well, I'm retired now, and it seems like everything's going wrong. I've got this broken tooth, and I'd like you to fix it, but hopefully you can give me better news than any of my other doctors, because something's not right, and I've been tested and prodded and had all sorts of labs drawn and x-rays taken, and they can't tell me what's wrong with me. And I said, oh no, I'm really sorry to hear that. And I sat down and started talking with him about what he was going through, what was happening. And we talked about his health in general and what was happening and why in his retirement he thought he'd be relaxing and it not quite happening that way. And we finally eventually got around to talking about his tooth and fixing it for that day, but he had some other issues. He had to come back and see me. So this began this new relationship, this new journey with Mr. Smith. And I saw this now as an opportunity. And every time he would come in, we would have conversations and we would talk about his faith. Mr. Smith was a Christian. I didn't even know it. And he was struggling with it because there were some new things coming up, new doctrines in his church that he just didn't seem felt to fit with the Bible, and he had questions. And so we talked and we shared and we talked about his faith and my faith, and we talked about healthy living. And I had a few brochures. I had the Amazing Facts brochure in my lobby, and he picked it up one day and he brought it in. He said, can you talk to me a little bit more about this? And so we talked, and we had these continuous encounters over a few months. And even to a point where Mr. Smith would come in and ask me for recipes. And this one occasion he came in, I was just getting ready to start a Diabetes Undone program at my church. And I invited him. His sugars were out of whack, etc. And he was really excited to be a part. And it just became this really great relationship that we developed. A couple of weeks later, just before we could start the program, I got a call that Mr. Smith had passed. His illness had gotten the best of him. They still hadn't figured out what was wrong. It was complications from diabetes, hypertension, the regular things that we see in our life and in our practice. And I cried. I I was really moved that day. One, I felt guilty, Lord, like I would have let this patient just go on and had no conversation. But I cried because I also missed an opportunity I felt to really make sure that his call at an election was sure if I could. Could I have done more? Could I have done better? Could I have said something more to know? But then I cried because I felt like I had been humbled. God showed me that my quick judgment over this patient to kind of toss him aside, that he wasn't worthy, that, or he wasn't interested, and I just couldn't do anything. God showed me that his ways are not always our ways. Our thoughts are not always God's thoughts. But he loves each and every one of the patients that I see. And no matter what they bring to me, the fact that they've come, God has brought them there. And I have a mission and a ministry, and God has given me this calling to create opportunities and allow for opportunities for doors to be opened over and over again so that he can win souls through the work that I do. And I'm just so grateful for that opportunity because as healthcare providers, each and every day, God brings people to us. No matter what their walk of life, their frame of mind, when they step through the door, we should know that this is an opportunity to be in service for God. And so I encourage you today, as you go about your day, as you treat your patients, think about the opportunity for everlasting impressions that God has given you. Try talking to these patients. Just send a prayer. Each and every one that comes, ask God to give you that divine providential opening that day that you can have that conversation with a patient. It may be a story, it may be a testimony, it may be even just hearing their concern and offering prayer. But God will open doors. And your practice will not just be health care, but it will be soul care and winning souls to the kingdom of heaven. So I encourage you today, ask God to give you that divine appointment, and he most certainly will.